I'm here with Laure Jackson. Hello, Anne.
Hello, it is great to be here.
Another Sensory Health chat.
Yes, our lovely weekly chats. So precious, so lovely, such a lovely thing to do.
It is because Sensory Health affects us all, as I keep on banging on about. But you're now in the magazine too.
Yes. I like Pure Just is it's blossoming, it's flourishing from tiny little seeds. It's like you've got a shoot here and a shoot there, and it's a lovely thing to be a part of. So also thank you to you and the family and the team to be part of this, because it's lovely. It's lovely birthing something new and being part of something that you believe in. I think we all need to find the things that we believe in and that we want to do, and that brings joy in and of itself. That brings us alive. It's a very healthy thing to do.
I was thinking about sensory health in terms of reading. I'll come on to that in a minute. But just in case we're not being too cryptic, Pure Media, the magazine, you can sign up for a monthly magazine for your whole family, from our family to yours, at puremediafamily.com/magazine. I think the next one for April, we've got something like 22 different articles from a massive range of stuff on faith and life and joy and finance, sensory health, medical health as well, emotional health. There's all these different amazing writers from all around the world. And this is one of the things that really excites me. We've got Jersey for yourself. We've got the UK, so we've got Scotland, we've got Wales and England. We've got parts of the USA, and we've got someone coming on from Finland, and another friend of ours who wants to write for us as well. So I love the multi-flavored thing, which brings me back to my first thought. So one of the things we had to decide with the magazine was you have UK spelling and you have US spelling.
You
So,
do.
for example, if you just look at the word favor, if you have favor for somebody, the Americans, bless them, they don't know how to put the U in. So it's Favor. Okay. So we had to think, well, do we honor how they write in US English or in proper English? And how do we do that? Because I like some of the American spellings that make more sense to me than some of the UK. But then I was thinking, well, from a reader's point of view, which is my question, how complicated it would be from a sensory perspective to go from this is effectively a British manufactured magazine with random US spellings where you're thinking that's not right. How many people might be really affected by the lack of a U and misspellings in their own thoughts?
Yeah, that's such a big one, because we've dealt with that. I've home educated with an American curriculum, and all the time, I caught my boy yesterday. He said, "Oh, I've gotten this, Mum." And I looked at him and I said, "You have what?" I said, "We say in English, we say I have got this." Like, what has gotten? So yeah, we have our funny little Americanism moments, and also because of the amount of things that we consume on YouTube and this, that, and the other anyway. But it is quite funny. And it is, it is a strange one, but a nice one to on. And as you say, some of the things it makes so much more sense if you put it in American spelling, but it's very confusing to have them both in one article. And also if you're trying to do spell check, that's really confusing for the computer. Yeah. I think possibly more of a problem for the computer than it is for the humans, actually. Because I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't notice how favor is spelt, or behavior. I get that all the time because I write a lot about behaviors, and there's always a U missing, or whether it's a Z or an S, and the peculiarities. It would niggle, but I think if somebody knows, it would be nice and honouring if somebody is an American, that it's kept in their language. You just have to make a decision. It's going to be interesting to see which way you come down on this. Are you going because actually you are a British organisation that welcomes people from all nations to feed into it, but the standard is we are British and we're going to go with the British spelling? Or are we going to go, well, actually, if someone's in Australia and they want to write something with a bit of a some Aussie words or twang or whatever else, well, you're just going to do it their way. So have you actually decided which way you're going to go?
Yes, after a production meeting of what do we do? Because I love honouring people bringing what they bring. I don't want to say, can you do this? Because, yes, one time is fine, but you probably found this. We love what you do, but can you do it very, very specifically within these really rigid boundaries and then say, well, that was rubbish. What was wrong with you? Well, because you put me in too small a box and you didn't like the part of me that you wanted to be me in this place. So
Yes.
I was thinking, well, I think we should honor the US and the English spellings. I've got a lady from Finnish who writes brilliantly, by the way, in English, but she said, well, I'm okay with this as long as you're going to proofread it for me for English readers, because obviously there's some colloquialisms and subtleties that perhaps, while she's brilliant, she might miss out on some of those. In the end, we settled on, I want one language thing for two reasons. One, I'm the editor, and I would need to have two computer systems, one in English, one in American. Otherwise, I'm going to get all sorts of random weird spellings. But also little things like if I take a quote from something and use it, it's going to look even worse. So in the end, I thought, I'm going to actually write in English, proper English, and I'm going to add use in, even though some of them are written articles, so that favour will be spent in the English UK version of the word favour. So
Hmm.
we've gone standardised it across the lot because I thought, I don't care. I mean, I can happily read the word favour in American English and proper English, and it doesn't bother me there's a U or there isn't a U or what have you. But I thought somebody out there is going to be struggling to go from one to the other. So if it's all consistent, my hope from a sensory perspective, which was my ultimate conclusion, you'll be proud, was I think it should be the same spelling syntax across the entire magazine.
Yeah, I think that is compatible because then you're not. It is that change that's often the difference, that you have this once and then you've got this and then you change back again and this then, and it's change that's difficult. So if people know when they're reading your magazine, right, this is the way that it is. There is a consistency, and they're not having to flick between American English, Aussie English. Just yeah. So there you go.
But the other thing I have done, which will be, I suppose, more confusing because we've corrected US to UK English, is there's a little flag by each person who's writing, so you know the nationality. That might create more confusion because we've now got a US person writing, but you have to make a decision somewhere that you can actually sustain.
Yeah, and I think sustain, and because this is a computer, ironically, isn't it so funny that it's actually the computer? Because imagining editing something like that, if you did not have a consistent language, you'd have to that's massively too complicated for the sake of what it is. Yeah. So
But here's another one for you. From a grammar perspective, I edit every single article, and I think we've got 22 articles of an average of 600 words. So I don't know how many words that is. I quite like editing. It's fine. It's not a chore. I love it, but it's quite a lot. And actually, I don't want to change the flavour of the writer either, because they might use their own way of speaking, which is a really good way of adding flavour. But I don't want to lose that. But also edit out grammar so there's a consistency of grammar. Do you put a comma before the word and? Or not. I mean, there's a whole thing on that. So I've actually thought, you know what? I'm going to make it consistent so someone can read from cover to cover. My hope is that it's easier to read because one, it's the same UK spelling, not US, UK, Finnish, UK, or Canadian UK, whatever. So there's that consistency. But also, so it's the same grammar.
yeah.
Because I always write as if I'm speaking. That's how I write down, which is why people seem to like what I write, because I write in a very easy to digest way with correct grammar as much as possible. But I've even made that consistent and standardized it. So I edit everything to make it more consistent, hopefully without taking anything of the original writer's character of writing.
I mean, who'd have thought it was so complicated? I mean, the language is a remarkable thing, and the fact that we've even been designed to work out how to communicate takes us back to handwriting. But the fact that even we can even speak and communicate and understand what those words mean by changing how our muscles work in our tongue inside our mouth and putting that on the breath in order for it to mean something, for the brain then to hear these sound waves, convert it into language, to then be able to associate feelings and thoughts and emotions and that meaning to it for communication to happen. There are some things in this world that totally bamboozle me, as the basics of our humanity is utterly, utterly remarkable. And that's spoken word. And then we've got, how on earth did we create? How are we inspired to use our hands to put on some implements to then draw on a wall, draw on a cave, draw on a piece of paper, draw on something to communicate an experience that we've had that we want others to share with us. It is quite remarkable.
I mean, the basic of sensory health for me, the most important part is the ability to communicate with other human beings in a meaningful way that can generate beneficial, helpful relationships. For me, a good sensory health would mean I can communicate to somebody else in a way that's good for both of us. A bad sensory health situation would be, well, I don't care about what they think. They've got to cope with what I'm doing and tough, just suck it up and get on with it. And there is a dividing line, which I know you've brought up quite a few times of, yes, bad behavior is never okay, but let's try and understand why there's bad behavior without saying bad behavior is now okay. Because, hey, it's sensory health. So it's all right that you punched them. It's a sensory health issue. Well, no, it's still not okay.
Yeah.
But it is okay to say that whilst it's not right, maybe there's actually something else going on, which I know something that you've done quite a lot in the schools.
And there's some sensitivities. It's the same way that how communication just happens and it's quite remarkable, whether it be spoken or written. The same way with sensory health, we're not aware of it until we do have those problems. We're not aware of how profound the little things that we do affect someone else. So as you were talking there and describing it, I was thinking of some of the children that they get too close to other people. There's a social understanding of getting too close, and they're quite rough with others, or they're rough with their pets, or they're rough with their brothers and sisters, or they're rough with their parents even. And they don't realize from a sensory perspective that that isn't good communication, for want of a better word. It's a not good use of their body, but they don't know any better. They don't feel their body the same way that the rest of us do, so that they are overly aggressive, that they're overly into you, and don't have those personal boundaries, don't have that personal space. But it's not it's not a cognitive thing. It's something that they're not aware of. And then when we can get them more integrated into their bodies, then they can realize where their body boundaries are and where other people's bodies boundaries are, and therefore, will be somewhat less aggressive, we trust, with people, and a bit more socially, physically appropriate, and communicate with their physical bodies in a much more appropriate way.
Doing the magazine has got me thinking about other sensory stuff. For example, I learned many, many years ago about fonts that you can use. So we use a particular one that I read was the most easy to read in written form, if you like, as opposed to on a screen where you want a slightly different font. We ended up thinking, well, how do we do that? Are we going to have one font for magazine because we want to print it as well? That's a lot of work. So we've gone for the one that is easiest to read on a piece of paper rather than on a screen. Still okay on a screen, it maybe not be completely as good. So all the time you're trying to make these, I suppose compromises isn't quite the word I'm going for, but you're trying to do the best you can for people. For example, if someone's suffering from dyslexia, you don't put red background because it's one of those little things that I've learned along the way. Red background, it's harder for an individual with dyslexia to read. So you're constantly thinking of how can we make this that's actually for as many people as possible, but you also have to balance it. If we make it completely for somebody who's got dyslexia, most people would think, well, that's not very nice, I'm not going to touch that, because it wouldn't look graphically as good. So you've always got this, I suppose, contention, this juxtaposition of making something that is as good as you can, as attractive as you can, because you want people to want to read it, but also thinking about people who are going to struggle. So we've got a little thing in there on the online reader for visual readers to help. A friend of mine, he struggles with sight, so he has all sorts of things on his phone. So hopefully it'll work with that. I haven't checked yet, but it'll read it to him. That's the hope.
That's brilliant. That's really good. And also, what I did like about when I got my magazine through online, yeah, I just opened it up. As in, I zoomed it open just so that it was just so much easier. I don't have visual issues. I suppose I wear glasses for reading, but it was just so much nicer to be able to just zoom it out to what it was easy to see. Because yeah, having also that visual perception, not just the color, but the contrast between a background, yeah, and a font, or the type of color. For some, they will struggle. So having that variety meets lots of different needs within a magazine. Okay, there may be one little bit they might not get, but hopefully over the kind of like the course of the magazine, there is a bulk of information that they can read because the backgrounds are better, the fonts of a certain size, the fonts of a certain type. The balance is correct. There's not too much visual clutter, and yet there's enough for some. It's a real skill to find something and to make it look and sound and feel and to suit all the different needs. But that's what we have to do. It is life, isn't it? Accommodate as much as we can, do as much as we can for the people that live in that bell curve, and then have other things like you said, that lovely visual reader for someone who needs it, or any of these other accessibility issues for those that would struggle with other things too.
There is a lot. I mean, this is a magazine that we've launched, and I am trying to think, literally from a sensory perspective, of if someone struggles with dyslexia, which may not necessarily be sensory health, it's more of a physiological issue. I think it's not a sensory thing, is it? Dyslexia?
No, not the
No.
classic, not the classic aspects of dyslexia, but it does feed into, or there's a lot of crossover with dyspraxia that is a sensory based issue, or that can be a sensory based issue. So, but yeah, dyslexia in and of itself isn't a sensory isn't a sensory issue.
But I guess my thought with the magazine is, as a sort of a topic for today, there are things that we can do. We can either say we don't care. It's a magazine, it's free, but I mean, you can get it or don't. If you don't want to read it, that's your problem. And if you can't read it, well, I'm not going to do anything. We can have that attitude of it's here. If you want it, take it. Now, we have clearly haven't gone for that attitude, but we have gone for how can we try and accommodate as many additional people as possible who may have additional struggles whilst retaining the core of something that is graphically good and appealing to the majority of people for whom that would be important, colors and contrast and all that. But even if you're thinking about that dyslexia thing of, well, not a red background, for example, there are people who benefit from not seeing it on red anyway. It's not easy seeing on red. I've seen something yellow on a red background. As somebody who has no issues with dyslexia, I'm thinking, you want me to read this? Or light grey on a dark blue? Who thought that was a great idea? So there are things that actually some of these struggles that people have, it does feed back. And if we listen to their struggles, it's going to make it better for everybody.
It was really interesting when I was doing my last course as well. We've just got part of the Sensory Super System CPD certified, so our continuing professional development. And we put it out before we actually put that together. We asked, we asked like a subsection of my people, do you want it on a white background, like the PowerPoints, or do you want it on a slightly different coloured one? And it was the vast majority of people said, we want a coloured one rather than the pure white. I love a pure white background. I find it really easy to pick things off. But the majority were saying, look, we'd rather have it with a bit of colour, in the background. So it's just like, well, let's do that for this one. We are now past. I think we last week or the week before that, we got our certificate through for being CPD certified. So that was great. But yeah, it's interesting to be able to think of things in a different way. And I do say, if anybody does have your magazine at home, and if it comes through, do you have a physical version, or is it all online? Or
there will be a printed one. This is it at the moment. It's on really rubbish A4 paper because we wanted to see what does it actually look like. What's the flow, what's the feel. We looked at the printed and thought, you know what, it's great on a screen monitor because you can zoom in, but it's very hard to gauge it. So we thought, you know what, we need to increase the general font size a little bit. That's why we're not printing it. We're just trying to get the flow and the feel of a good magazine that's got loads of stuff. So this is the only printed one at the moment, which is 38 pages. There will be a printed one in the future.
I was going to say, because other people can make sure, but those who have these issues will know. They'll go to the specialist companies that can put filters over their computer screens so that it can change that, change the color of if it's easier, if they need it a slightly different, if they need a bluer tint, or if they need a greener tint, or if they do. So some will actually want a slightly reddier tint. I remember working with this chap. He had massive auditory processing issues and tactile issues. He hated it, like wearing clothes was such an issue for him. He was exhausted by the end of the day just because his skin was that sensitive, and he could hear a pin drop like miles away. Remarkable. But he needed red glasses. We managed to get an assessment with someone in the visual field that I worked with, who would be able to analyze the color spectrum for people to see through. So I was working on his auditory and his tactile processing, and we had other folk working with his visual, but it was really lovely for him when he was able to get red glasses finally, and just went around life literally looking through. It wasn't rose tinted glasses, but it was red glasses, and that really helped him.
I'll tell you another thing that I thought about. I mean, this is the only printed one we've got because we printed it just to see font size, does it flow okay? Is the pattern right? But one of the reasons why we wanted to have a print and a digital is, which, I mean, I live in a digital world. We are, we were a digital online radio station, but I also like tactile stuff. So
Mm.
when I put it on the table for our production meeting, like people were having a look at it because it's literally in the right order, it's the right size. And I noticed that as I left it there after the meeting, somebody then came up and started reading it. I thought, well, this is really interesting. I didn't know you'd written that, my editorial from one on my own team, because he kind of scanned it on a screen, but when he looked at it in a book form, which is what a magazine is, which is why we want to print it, he
Mm.
started to just read it and it started to go in even better. And he started to think, and it was his own pace. And it was interesting the difference between visual reading and paper reading.
Yes, yeah, there's so much more proprioceptive, tactile aspects to that, and your whole body starts to get involved, even though it looks as though you're reading the same thing, it's the same words. The sensory experience is hugely different. And I have to say, that's what I really appreciated, because I'm not used to reading magazines online. That's just not what I would do, because if I'm going to sit there, it's because I want a cup of coffee and I want to hold something and I want the full sensory experience. I want a blanket over my knee and I want to cuddle up. And it would, for me, that's what I would do with a magazine. It's the full thing. Or if I'm sitting in a waiting room or whatever else. But yeah, so when I was looking at yours, the ability, did it actually have that noise? I don't know if
Yes.
it had that sound. It did have a sound effect, but the kind of pages flicked and I went, oh, and it was just that sense that it wasn't just right, okay, just like on a normal screen where it would move over. It actually kind of like folded visually, and then you say it had the auditory impact as well, and that was a little enjoyable something. Little things that bring us pleasure. It's good.
A couple of people actually messaged me and said, I love that when I turned the page, it made a noise of a page being turned. We've turned on page curl, which it's a fancy way of saying when you go to turn the page, it's like when you start to turn a page and it starts to fold over and it doesn't, it's like a curl, isn't it? There at the beginning of the page. We turned that on because I thought, well, it looks a bit more like a real magazine. So it's nice that we've got a positive reaction like that. But that's the multi-sensory input that you don't get from a screen.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's clever that they're trying to do what they can. And I suppose that's where folks are still trying to work on smell-o-vision. The fact that we can get an extra, how can we get, especially for all the deer cooking, programs that are on TV or that are on our screens, it's like, yeah, we're really missing something there that, they try and communicate what they can and how gorgeous it tastes and all the rest of it. And this is like, yeah, I mean, we're doing the best we can with the technology that we have to date. But it's interesting that we're all heading to be more, the more sensory we can make it, the more appealing it actually is.
Which is an interesting thought from a sensory perspective. I was thinking about like I suppose post COVID, everyone's zoomed out literally because we're all on Zooms all the time. It's school, it's church, it's not going down the pub, but having a pint at home with a Zoom meeting with your mate. It's not the same. It might have been a good temporary help through COVID when we're all in lockdown and all that stuff. But actually, there is something nice about holding, and this is why I want to make it printed, holding something in your hand, which is a magazine, which you got the sounds as it's curling over, and you got the little creases in the crinkles, and those, they add to the sensory enjoyment. But I'm guessing also there'll be those for whom those little noises won't be reassuring and lovely, but irritating, and I can't cope.
And that goes back to, remember, like we had my couple of lads that hated paper. They could not touch paper. They were not going to do their handwriting. So and that's where if you have an online and you've got paper, I mean, okay, not being able to touch paper is quite rare, even in my world. But there will be certain things that will be, yeah, off-putting for people just because. And it's knowing, well, that's where I would want to work on the rest of their day. That these are areas, what I call sensory diets, where you put in as much good sensory input, the right amount, not too much of this, not too much of that, according to somebody's sensory thumbprint, which is how we discover how they're uniquely made. So that if you have them in as good a neurological place as possible, when the things happen, say, for example, something gets delivered through the door and they're excited because it's a magazine, but actually the paper might be too glossy or it might be too shiny or something. They have that tolerance. We want to build tolerance into people's lives so that for the things that are a little bit more disconcerting, not as helpful for their own sensory systems, that they're able to accommodate that. They're able to, just have that little bit more tolerance to be able to accept those things without having to withdraw or say, right, yeah, I'm not going to read that, or I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to do this. We want people to be engaging with life as much as possible. And if we can set their systems, their nervous systems at the best place possible, then they can cope with the more unexpected or the things that might not be their preference, wouldn't be their choice, but they can manage it and they can cope with it. We just want people to be, my job is to help people cope in life better.
By opening up life to them, not saying, okay, you can't do that. Well, let's not bother with that bit. We'll cut that out of your life. You can't hold paper. Don't worry. You've never got to hold paper again. Well, they're going to have to at some point. One way or another, they're going to find paper. I love the fact that paperless offices have got so much paper in them because an email doesn't help. I get stuff printed out when I want some writing or whatever. And I always say to the team, print it out for me because it's the best way. I can look at it. I can write on it. It's impossible to do that on a screen. Yes, you can highlight it and you can add little notes. But if I've got a piece of paper and I've got stuff written on it, I can actually highlight it and I can cut bits out. Actually, I can get quite very physical with it. And it really helps. And, I don't think it's much a learning or me thing, but having stuff in front of you is really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And we can talk about like kinesthetic learners, the way people people learn by doing, but the multisensory approach to most of life, because we are multisensory beings. Designed specifically.
Amen. But your job is saying, okay, you can't hold paper, don't worry about it, but let's see if we can get you to hold paper. Or are there some aids that we can help you that you don't have to physically touch it? My wife can't stand pottery, so it's not been glazed. She can't touch it. She's like, this funny reaction that she has. So she doesn't touch unglazed pottery or unvarnished wood because it's the tactile thing that she just reacts to. Mm-hmm. But actually, we can work on that. And that's I guess, is the bit of that you do is the occupational therapy side of engaging people better into life, as you were saying, not just, oh, well, never mind, never touch paper. Well, that's not really a solution. It might be a great solution for the day, but when you get that letter from the bank that they want you to look at and you've got to read it, what you're going to do if it's come through the letterbox, you have to physically read it. Council tax, or when do the bins go out? These stupid little charts that change the week after that, then change again and you don't tell all that stuff. But we have to hold it and it comes through and we can't just disregard it. We have to engage with it. And that's where what you're doing is helping people.
Yeah. And then we're talking about like the bins there. Somebody this week was just saying that how the smell is just so awful for them, and it is debilitating, and they're not able to function because they can't take the bins out. It's a small thing, but you can imagine. I mean, I've just heard actually in Birmingham or something that there's even the bin men have gone on strike. Or call it, that's a wrong terminology, but those who empty the bins, they're not doing it. And I'm just thinking, oh, crumbs, that we really need to be able to help those who are particularly oversensitive smell wise, because that is going to be built up. That is going to be really, really unpleasant. And can easily cause people to start vomiting. You'll have people not going into work because they genuinely will feel very ill going through a place where the smell is just awful.
Interesting, because I guess most people would see the strikes in Birmingham, the refuse isn't collected. Oh, that's an issue for hygiene. It's an issue for the streets. It's an issue for rubbish and rats and all the stuff. But actually, you've gone straight to what about people who can't cope with the smell, which is such a powerful emotion and sensory connection.
Mm-hmm. And that started just for one person in their own home. Was struggling because of the smell of their own bin. So we had to look at all different kinds of things and sprays and nose clips, as well as regulating, trying to reduce their arousal levels so they're not so stressed in the first place. Because when you're heightened, when you are more aware, then your sensory sensitivities increase. So that's how can we calm things down? And that's just in somebody's home, and yet you've got whole streets that are stinking.
Yeah, not great. And thank you. I didn't know we were going to go that way today, but hey, everything's an example of who needs it to be, and I'm happy to be the example if it helps one person.
Yeah, it's just great. I love it. Keep chatting.
If you want to find out more about Anne, to connect with her supersensory system and all the other stuff that she does, you can go to our website, pure247radio.org, pure247radio.org/ALJ, and you can connect with Anne and all that she's doing around the world. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
See you again next week.
Well.